I just want to return for a few minutes with Emily Maitlis, co-host of Global's podcast and News Agents, to the very topic that we talked about at the beginning of the programme, that of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Virginia Giuffre, the late Virginia Giuffre now. It seems to me that the road is getting narrower and narrower for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and arguably even the royal family as well, because there are certain demands, aren't there, just growing for action on a number of fronts. Emily, Andy Hughes has spoken, I know, to the news agents as well as he spoke to us about the Metropolitan Police and the role that they may have in all of this. We'll talk about that in just a second, but I know that you've spoken to Virginia Giuffre's brother, Sky Roberts, because her maiden name was Roberts, of course. Here's a little clip of that interview that you've done.
I think first and foremost, we need to open an active investigation on Andrew. I think you can clearly see within the files that there's some sort of implication there. And, I do know that the king said that he would be supportive of that. I can share with you that the head of the Metropolitan Police had reached out to us a handful of months ago. And they gave us roughly a week. I mean, we were fairly down with the flu that week, so we asked for just a few days to respond. And by the time we were ready to respond, they actually just kind of indicated that it was an open and shut case. And this was specific to Virginia and him inquiring about gaining her Social Security. And so it just, I think for Andrew in particular, I think his brother has done an amazing job of putting pressure on him, but there's no way he should be living where he's living and still holding the esteem that he has. I mean, I know he's been stripped of his titles, but he looks like he's still pretty comfortable these days. I think for somebody that may have committed these types of crimes, there should be a more thorough investigation that takes place. And if it is found that he's implicated, then he needs to be put behind bars.
Well, Emily Maitlis is here to talk about that. Sky Roberts has become effectively Virginia's voice now, hasn't he, since she died?
Yeah, he has. He's taken on her advocacy and he pays tribute to the fact that it was her bravery and her sort of vocal stance that led other survivors and other victims to sort of come forward and talk about Epstein's crimes. But I think what you're hearing from Sky Roberts now is a hardening of a position. He's always been very supportive, actually, of the actions of the king, certainly last October, and the fact that he stripped Prince Andrew then, of his title, and the rest of it, moved him out. And yet that little line that you heard there, that the Met Police reached out to Sky Roberts, opened an investigation, and to put that into context, it was the news we had that suggested that Prince Andrew had gone after Virginia Giuffre, tried to track her down through her social security number and essentially dox her. Let it be known that she was, in his words, a sort of a fraud. She'd made up stories. The fact that the Met Police reached out to Sky Roberts, but then within the space of what sounds like a week or 10 days, shut down that investigation, I think is what has led him now to say, this is not good enough. This is not happening at the kind of pace or the kind of depth that we want to see.
And they didn't share with him what they had found about that.
It sounds like it went nowhere, because this was last October, and he said by the time they'd actually got their papers together and gone back to the police, the whole thing had been shut down. You've been talking to Andy Hughes, and I think a lot of the focus now is on this relationship between the royal family and the Met Police, and it is complicated by this really quite odd role that the protection officers play.
Close enough to save your life, but not close enough to... What? ... Fill in the blanks.
What is that role, right? Are they primarily for the security of the royal family? Yes. But if they see wrongdoing, what happens? Are they considered disloyal? If they then take that back to headquarters, are they meant to report what they see? There's the question that Andy told us about of a speeding fine. If they see a young or a minor royal speeding and they report that, is that considered somehow to be treacherous?
And then lose their job.
That
raises questions, doesn't it?
But I think what's happening now, and you described it perfectly, I think, as a road narrowing, is that the royal family at one point thought this is an Andrew problem. Andrew's got to sort out his Andrew problem. And now they're thinking, maybe it isn't just an Andrew problem. Maybe this is an us problem. Maybe this is an institutional problem. On whatever pace that they were going at. And remember that These allegations have been hanging in the air for over a decade. The interview I did was more than 6 years ago now. They've suddenly realised that the public appetite for action of some kind, I don't mean sort of a vigilantism, but just the questioning, just the asking of the right questions, has really got to a place where they can't just ignore it. They can't shrug it off and go, oh, it's his problem, not ours.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true for the Met Police, that whereas once upon a time the Met Police would say, well, our primary duty is to the royals and they're the ones that we're protecting, now they sort of say, well, hang on.
Yeah, typically we don't comment, but it's not sufficient anymore.
No,
is it? No.
And they've responded to Andy Hughes on his story because they realise they have to be seen to be doing.
Did Sky Roberts have much to say about events at the tail end of last week at Congress?
I mean, he was in the room. That extraordinary moment where Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, was being asked by Democrats, essentially put in the House Judiciary Committee, was asking her why she was trying to cover up the Epstein case. And not all, but many of the survivors of Epstein were standing behind her. And when the Democrat in the room asked how many of them had asked for FaceTime with Bondi and been refused it,
hands went up.
Hands went up. Sky Roberts was one of those in the room. And it was a moment of, I think, quite profound humiliation for Bondi, because she had her back to the survivors. Now, you don't have to be a PR guru to see how terrible that looks.
At least turn a little, yeah.
I mean, you haven't met with them. You're trying to tell us that the whole Epstein thing is over now. She was redirecting people towards the rise of the stock market as if to say, oh, don't worry about that, look over here. And Sky Roberts said that he had reached out, never had time with her department, never actually been able to make their case as to why it was important. And critically, he said to me, Emily, more than a decade ago, Virginia, his sister, had given a testimony to the FBI where she named 40 men that were implicated in the rape and trafficking of her alone. And nothing had happened. They have those names. They're not even redacted anymore in the files. They have all those names. They could go after any of the men that she has talked about. They could go and investigate the people whose wrongdoing is staring us in the face, and they're not. And
Trump is saying move on as well, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, Trump is saying I didn't have a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, since 2005. I think that has now been shown that Jeffrey Epstein was at Mar-a-Lago. But yeah, I mean, is Pam Bondi speaking because she's trying to interpret what Trump wants? Probably. Is it helping? I don't think it's helping him politically. I don't think it's helping her politically. And I think the Republican Party is in danger of looking like they're on the side of the Epstein class, of covering up the cover-up. Yeah, as opposed to getting to the bottom of it.
And we were saying, 10 days ago, or maybe less, how come it's a British prince and a British prime minister that are feeling the heat here when there's so much going on in America as well? We now know the Clintons are going to appear before that committee, and Hillary Clinton's been pretty vocal today about it, hasn't she? But do you think that heat it's clearly ramped up and is ramping up here still, in the UK? Do you think that's going to continue in the US as well?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I do. I mean, I think there are so many strands to the Epstein Files. That's, as a product of how many pieces of information there are. And when you're sifting through at least 3 million, and we understand now that the 3 million we've got is probably less than 5% of the total in terms of the information and the images and the videos. It's overwhelming, frankly, to know where to start. But I think that the pressure and the public appetite to see more happening more quickly is there.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Emily. Good to talk to you.